Hey, how you doing? This is John, and welcome to John's Long Box. We back again with Adam Reeves. Adam made a comic a year ago already, right? Jeez,
That's right. It is a year ago. Ooh.
yeah. Mixing another two of my favorite things. Like I have a couple of obsessions. One of it is comic books, another is board games, and another is music. So I love when two of my obsessions get merged. You know what Reese's peanut butter cups over there, right? Your chocolate, my peanut butter. Do you have those commercials over there?
We don't have the commercials, but we do have Reese's Pieces. We know what they are. They're not like
Okay,
big
so
here, but
so this
we have
you're
the.
you're the peanut butter and I'm the chocolate. We're getting together. And we're making a Reese's peanut butter cup of comic books and music. So tell us about
I love
Trombone
it.
Man. I really liked it, and I can't wait. And I already backed it. We'll bring up your campaign in a minute.
Well, thank you for backing it, John. Well, Trombone Man is a serialized graphic novel uh, about a Jamaican trombone player by the name of Don Drummond, who was a founder member of a band called the Scatterlights, who initially existed in the 1960s, just for like less than 2 years, and they recorded maybe like 500 or 600 songs in that time, and they backed a whole load of other people, including Bob Marley, Jimmy Cliff, and Desmond Decker, lots of kind of people who went on to become big stars in reggae. Um, but they were like a studio house band, and they had this trombone player called Don Drummond, who was a kind of some sort of prodigy slash genius, recognized when he was a child. And I'm adapting a biography of him by Heather Augustine, who's from um, Michigan. And yeah, the first one came out last year, first in the series, called Barefoot Boy.
Right. The first book was about his childhood, and I can't claim to know everything about, but I told you the story last time we talked that years ago I dated a girl. One of her parents was from Trinidad, one of the other parents was from Jamaica, and you would go to her house and it was just rock steady, as they called it, rock steady, rock steady, rock steady,
Steady.
and they play, and I just grew to love this music. And I was at work, I'm by myself, I'm in a room literally for a month. I would go into this one room for a month just doing all this intricate stuff, a machine room in a large building, so a lot of work, running pipe and everything, blasted rock steady. And you'd just see these Jamaican Rasta guys stick their heads in the doors every once in a while, and then stick their heads in the doors, look around. And after about 3 days, they realized I was the one listening to the music, and they were like, we did not expect you to be listening to the good jams, and then we just hit it off. We worked together for about 2 months. They would have their breaks in my machine room, and we would just listen to me talk about it. But so I knew about the Skylights. I didn't know they only around for 2 years because they put out so much
Less, less
music.
than, less than that.
Yeah,
But then they
and
reformed like 30 years later, and there's a version of them still touring the world.
yeah,
Um,
a lot of these guys, because I was about a year ago, I was working with the guy, we just called him the preacher, and he was from Jamaica, and he was like, I just saw these guys last year. I just saw, they're still touring, but obviously it's not the original. So they're still around. Some.
well, there's a version of them. They're playing the Scatterlights music. I mean, it's a bit like if you have a broom and you change the handle and then you change the head, is it still the same broom?
The ship of
Um,
Theseus, right? You heard that? The ship of
but
Theseus paradox? Yeah.
no, but
Oh, Theseus, the ship goes off to sea and the sail breaks, they replace the sail, the rudders break, they replace the rudder. And over the course of the voyage, everything gets replaced. When it comes back, is it still the same ship?
exactly same principle. But they're all top-notch Jamaican jazz musicians who play in the Scatterlights. You've got to be,
Yeah.
um,
Well, you were telling me, well, since we talked, you caused me to go and look up a lot of these musicians, like Drummond especially, because I didn't know about his short tragic life. That again, you only talked about his childhood in the first comic, but I started reading up on all these people, and then that would lead me to the woman that he was involved with. I don't want to spoil the story. And then like all the other musicians. But the thing that fascinated me the most, and I've been reading up on it, was you told me that they all pretty much went to like a reform school, as we say in the United States. Basically, kids get in trouble, juvenile delinquents. I don't know what the terms are in Britain, but that's where we used to go. I don't think we have them anymore. And they all and somebody there taught all these guys how to play music, and they became world class musicians. So life
I
handed.
wrote a book on it. I
Yes,
wrote
you
a
did.
book on the school. I co-wrote it. It's called
And
the
bring it
Alpha
down. We
Boys.
can't see the title. The Alpha Boys School. Yeah.
Alpha Boys School, Cradle of Jamaican Music is the book. And the nun you can see in the middle. Can you see the nun there?
Yes.
Sister Ignatius. So Sister Ignatius, she ran the music department in this school for 65 years.
65 years?
Yeah, 65 years.
Holy mackerel.
And she oversaw generation after generation of boys passing through. And it's an incredible story. Like she had this uncanny ability to recognize a spark of talent in children who didn't even know they had it. She would know who was right for the band. And during the 1940s, there was this one particular generation of the Alpha Boys band where literally like dozens of them went to be really influential, important musicians. I'm talking about, signing to Blue Note Records. I'm
Yeah,
talking
there's a
about
who's who.
this book, the whole point of this book is a reference book. It's 50 biographies of musicians who came out of Alpha. So there was a first wave of jazz musicians. And then a lot of those guys, some of them stayed within jazz, lots of them evolved. And then when ska happened in the early 60s in Jamaica, a lot of them gravitated towards that, and some of them joined the Scatolites. So 4 of the Scatolites were Alpha Boys. But some of your viewers might not even know what ska actually even is, because
Yeah, we talked about that last time, but it's such an interesting topic because I say rock steady for the Jamaican ska, and you were telling me that there were differences and things, and
rocksteady's different to ska. Like rocksteady's a different era. It's ska begat rocksteady, rocksteady begat reggae, and that's the kind of 10-year evolution of the music, and they're very different. So in a nutshell, ska, before the ska era in Jamaica in the late 50s up until the early 60s, they were emulating American rhythm and blues records. They were playing them on big sound systems, and that was the thing, was that they had these very competitive dances where they would play these American records that the migrant workers were bringing back every season. They'd come back loaded with these records, and then they'd sell them to these sound system operators. And then when rock and roll came in, a lot of that music, less of it was being made, and it was harder to get hold of. So the jazz musicians who were around in Jamaica, the first studios were built in the late 50s. There was one studio originally. They had a go at making their own rhythm and blues, but it was sung with Jamaican accents. There's actually quite a lot of this music was made. Jamaican style rhythm and blues. It's got its own Jamaican flavor. But out of this music, after a few years, they began to evolve their own style that was really uniquely Jamaican, which was kind of, if I can just say it in a very simple way. So you got 12-bar blues, kind of rhythm and blues, kind of going, but that's the underneath bit. But then you'd get this little guitar riff going over the top, which you hear in American R&B as well, which is a kind of chang, 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 which is just like a little pulse. And they highlighted that pulse and made it heavier. So it was like, and then they dropped out the 12-bar blues bit. And then it just became this kind of hypnotic kind of.
See, I love when you explain it like that. It's so.
And that's it. That kind of offbeat is pretty much the blueprint for everything that happened afterwards in Jamaica. Because reggae is an offbeat. I mean, it's a different rhythm.
Are you a musician yourself? Do you play?
No, I don't play music. I'm not. I just a music
Yeah,
fan.
I can't play a note. I can't. I love comics and I can't draw, and I love music and I can't play a note. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
appreciate it. That's my job. I just love that. You were saying that the Alpha Boys, they started in the '40s doing like jazzy record. Like, did they do like what we would consider in America like big band, or was it more like as we call like a bebop, like a smaller band?
they could play bebop. They were into bebop. They worshipped at the shrine of Dizzy Gillespie.
Oh, there you go.
They
Okay.
they were really into Dizzy. They, you know, the trumpet players. The kids at the Alpha School had this one copy of a book of the Dizzy Gillespie music school, and they studied this book, and it was all about. They used to have competitions as how many beats a minute you could play, and if you could get, you know, because Dizzy Gillespie was so fast, so many notes, so they could do all that. But when they left the school, they would join these kind of smallish swing bands, not big band swing, but they would join these local jazz dance bands. Um, but they were, you know, they were making money from playing the tourist hotels and local nightclubs. So they had to play a bit of everything. They had to play a bit of calypso, maybe a bit of Cuban mambo type music, and a bit of, you know, whatever jazz was around, a bit of film score music, Latin, you know, a bit of everything. And then later they had their own ska. They would bring that in, but in the 50s, that, you know,
Yeah,
they
so
would do
they
like a
learned
variety,
everything.
but they couldn't play what they would really want to play, which because it was too heavy. You know, the bebop, really squawky, noodly jazz. That's not what the clubs at that point. You know, they couldn't really play that, so they had to play that up in the hills. They would go up into the mountains to late night sessions, and that's where they would kind of play their own kind of free jazz at a place called Warwicker. But they channeled that back into the ska later on when the ska happened. Those guys would be channeling the kind of distillation of that into like these 3 minute songs,
Is
which
there
is why it's so unique.
is there a recognized first ska album or first ska musician?
There's a recognized first ska song um, called Easy Snapping by Theophilus Beckford,
Oh,
which is great. It's a great tune, and pretty much everyone unanimously agrees because it's actually got, it's quite a rhythm. It's like a Jamaican rhythm and blues track.
I'm just
It's
gonna
a piano,
I'm gonna
and it's
Google it
got
now so I don't forget, but I'm not gonna play it because YouTube will.
Theophilus Beckford. There's two versions. There's a reggae version done in the late 60s, but then there's the slow kind of ska version, and it's
What's it called again?
easy snapping.
Easy snapping. Easy snapping.
Snapping, easy snapping. Theophilus Beckford. He was a piano player, so that's really acknowledged as the first ska tune. But the music evolved quite a bit from that into something a bit more harder. And the thing you have to understand about ska, because people think of ska as like, you know, this ska punk thing that happened much later, but
Yeah, Madness in the
ska,
Specials, I think, is what
all of
people.
that. But ska was sound system music, so um, it was played on these bone shaking speakers at these dances. So it was like, it was outdoor as well. Like, so a lot of the clubs were outside because it's hot in Jamaica, and um, they used to have these things called lawns, which were just outside spaces, and they just set up a bar and some speakers, and the whole thing was about there was a lot of competition, and there was the sound system owners became stars in their own right. So, like, you might have heard of Prince Buster, like he was
Yeah.
a sound system operator.
Oh,
Coxsone
really?
Dodd, Duke Reed, these guys, they started off running sound systems, but then out of necessity and entrepreneurship, they got into out of competition, they got into making their own records so that they could have exclusive, you know, tunes for their sound systems.
Oh,
And
cool.
these guys became the kind of music moguls of Jamaica in the 60s. That was the business model, and it still is. Well, not so much now, but it was for about 40 years. The business model was sound system owner sets up a studio, produces their own records exclusively for their sound system. And then the wider distribution of selling records for domestic use was kind of like a secondary thing. No one even had a record player in the 60s anyway, so there was no point in selling them because, you know, poor people couldn't afford a record player. So it was all about exclusive one-off pressings for quite a long time.
Oh, oh, cool.
It's a whole different business model for music.
I'm going to bring up your campaign. I backed. I'm going to pretend. Oh, I'm back. I thought it. Okay, I'm just going to see what number backer I am because as soon as you said, it doesn't tell me. All right, but I didn't want to bring up my personal information just yet. But anyway, where am I? Where am I? Add to stage. So there we go. This is your Kickstarter for Trombone Man, Ska's Fall of Genius, a Jamaican Jazz Odyssey. Oh, good.
You can't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay, great.
Oh yeah, you're on the phone. You probably can't see it, but I'm going to make it bigger.
You can see it now. No, it's good.
See my face. But
that's Don Drummond.
Can I play the trailer?
Play the trailer, and before you do, I should just say the track that the soundtrack to that is going to be the accompanying soundtrack single that comes free with the comic. It's been specially recorded for us.
Oh, cool!
And it's going to be a 4-track EP, and we're hoping to press it on vinyl later in the year. So it's called Don's Lament.
Okay. Wow, that's great. It's a sad story, but it's a great trailer.
It's a really dark story.
Yeah.
He basically, Don Drummond descended into complete madness. He was put into a brutal and arcane mental asylum. He was not treated properly, we're talking about a Victorian type colonial mental asylum. And he early on in his life, he had many spells in this mental asylum. He was in and out there for years, all the while making jazz and then ska. And then he got into a relationship with this girl who was this famous rumba dancer, and he just got more and more crazy. And yeah, it's a terrible tragedy. He took her life, and it absolutely destroyed the Scatolites. The whole ska era kind of imploded, really, and that's part of why Rocksteady happened. The music moved on because it was just like it was never the same after that. And for years, like even though the Scatolites were this legendary band that, like, I discovered them in the 1980s,
Yeah, me
No
too.
one knew anything about him. You know, it was just a mystery and a lot of rumor and conjecture. And it wasn't until a biography by Heather Augustine came out, the one that I've adapted, and she just absolutely blew the story wide open, who Margarita was, her whole backstory. And I just felt like it, I mean, it had movie written all over it, um, but I thought comic book was kind of, well, I don't make movies, but
Yeah.
so that's kind of why I'm doing it. I wanted to shine a light on it, and obviously, you know, I don't want to glamorize him or what happened. You know, it's a terrible thing, but I felt like, you know, he's like a trombonist. He's probably one of the most influential trombonists of all time in any genre. I mean, right now in the world, all around the world, there is a ska or reggae scene in every continent, you know, all over. It's so influential. We're talking Japan, Peru, England, France, Germany, all over, you know, cities in America. There's a scene, and there's trombone is at the heart of it. And you speak to any of those musicians, and they will say, "Yeah, Don Drummond is who I emulate. That's the sound." So I don't think you could say that that's true of any other trombonist in the world right now. And yet, no one really knows about him.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody
I'm
knows what
into this
happened.
stuff, and I didn't know who he was until I read your comic. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Um, uh, and it's a fascinating tale, and there's so much sort of political backstory as well. You know, like the backdrop in Jamaica at that time, and you know, the socio-economic situation. You know, poor people were really being used as a weapon, being marginalised. You know, the politicians were just playing games with each other, and so I just wanted to bring all of that stuff in and kind of just show um, all the factors that led to uh, him first of all rising up as a genius and then kind of descending and imploding. But I also wanted to tell Margarita's life story as well. You know,
Yeah.
that's a big. I wanted to tell her story because I just thought she was a fascinating character, and as is often the case, women get forgotten about or written out of history. But also, like, I'm a big fan of Sister Ignatius. You know, this lady here. You know, she to me, she's the godmother of Jamaican music.
Yeah.
Um,
How fascinating is that? That now was this woman? I'm going to bring down your campaign, but I'll bring it back. Is this woman the sister Ignatius? Is she in charge of the school, or is she just a woman who is running the music department?
Well, no, she wasn't the head, but she was, you know, she had a lot of power there. Um, no, she mainly ran the music department, but she commanded a lot of respect.
Yeah,
She was very eccentric as a nun, so she was a boxer.
she was a
It's hard to
boxer.
believe. She was a boxer.
So the other nuns didn't want to mess with her. Then that explains that.
Well, she used to go around with a pair of boxing gloves and spar with the boys. She was pen pals with Sugar Ray Robinson, world champion boxer. And she actually collected movies about boxing. She studied, you know, she used to go to boxing matches. Um, she also collected records. She had a big record collection, which is in, you know, Mopop Museum in Seattle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, her record collection is there. She had her own sound system. She DJ'd on her own sound system. She used to throw parties for the boys in the school grounds, and then later outside in the streets, so neighbors could come as well. And she used to have a collection of like a lot of jazz, calypso, film scores.
Wow.
She collected ska music, all her boys, when they left and they were releasing ska. She collected all that stuff. And she stayed friends with them up until, you know, all through their lives. I mean, there's a guy in London now who's known as Tantan. Surname is Thornton, but the Jamaican pronunciation is Tantan. And Tantan, yeah, he was writing to Sister Ignatius all through his life, and she came to stay with him in London. He's a trumpet player. In fact, Tantan, um, you know, you've heard him play. I can tell you that every single person listening to this has heard Tantan play because that's his trumpet on the Beatles. Got to Get You Into My Life.
Oh, okay. I love that.
That's Tantan.
Okay.
Yeah, had a credit on the original sleeve, Edwin Thornton, in the original '60s copy. He's still alive. He's in a care home in West London right now. He was playing up until last year, playing in like a rock and roll rockabilly band with a family. He's a great character. Anyway, there's so many of these great characters who came out of that school, and a lot of them have passed on now. But some of them won't be known in the US. Some of them are kind of quite well known here, like Rico Rodriguez from the Specials. You know the Specials?
Yeah.
The trombonist in the Specials, Rico. He's just universally known as Rico. He was an alpha boy. He was mentored by Don Drummond. They had a system at the school of mentoring each other. Like you get assigned an older boy who would teach you what he'd learned on the instrument. And so he is a kind of legend of jazz reggae, basically.
And Marguerite, she has a song too, right? Didn't she?
She did. Margarita wrote a song. It's a very interesting record. It came out in around 65, not long before her death. And it's actually a love song to Don Drummond. It's called The Woman I Come. And it doesn't sound like anything else recorded during that era in Jamaica.
Yeah. I had to look up to see if she did any music, and I had to, like I said, you caused me to go on like a 2-month long rabbit hole of looking at, a lot of music that I didn't listen. Well, I mean, I've always liked this type of music, but I never claimed to know all about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so I was like, let me listen to see if she has music. Yeah, it was all interesting. Yeah.
Just one song. But what's interesting about that song is that at that time in Jamaica, the women, the girl, they were young girls really. They didn't really release many solo records. They'd more be like a part of a cute duet with a more well-known male singer. They'd do like a verse each kind of thing. So they weren't really taken seriously as singers. But Margarita wrote the lyrics to that song, and she conducted the session. She pretty much produced it. She created a song that, although her voice isn't that great on it, like it's a little bit off key, but it's strong on atmosphere and originality. And because like I said, it's not really ska. It sounds more like it could be from South Africa or somewhere. Like it's got more of a Miriam Makeba type sound. That kind of thing, or like an African folk jazz song, something like that. So it's interesting.
I at work I'll put on my headphones and I'll put on a Desmond Decker station or Don Drummond station stuff, and they, how Pandora kind of drifts, and I'm like listening. I'm like, oh, this is it. I never heard this before, and now I'm listening to Ethiopian jazz. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like stuff that I'm sure people in Ethiopia make their own music, but I don't think of it here sitting home in New York, So I've been listening to a lot of cool, interesting stuff. Like,
Ethiopian jazz is amazing. I mean, it's quite popular in the UK actually. And I've seen some of those guys like Maluto Astanke. I can't pronounce his name right.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it.
There's vibraphone player. Yes. I saw him play last year. He's about 90 or something. But that music there's definitely a quality of that in some of the ska, that kind of Eastern, they call it in reggae, they call it the Far East sound. It's kind of minor key, slightly atonal, sort of modal sounding, sort of a little bit veering into, I don't know, sort of really free jazz. I don't know what you call it, but definitely a bit of that vibe goes on in some of the ska, a little bit, Middle Eastern, sort of Arabic-y sounds, a bit gypsy-ish almost.
Yeah. So one of the things I remember when I first started reading your comic, first off, it's really well printed. That's one of my things is like, you get a comic and the ink comes off. Your comic is very well printed. It's a quality comic. But I remember reading and I was like, oh no, it's in like a what's the correct word? Like a dialect or
it's in dialect.
Yes, I was like, oh no. And at first I was like, oh, this is going to be rough. But a couple of pages into it, it couldn't be written any other way. You have like a glossary in the back, but I didn't really need to look at the glossary. It made sense in the context of everything. But I think it enhanced everything. It made it a little bit more immersive than if you just put it in, proper English.
Yeah.
I really did like it.
Well, Train Spotting, is written in dense Glaswegian dialect, and A Clockwork Orange has got its own unique
Yeah,
language. Doesn't really make any sense at all, but it didn't do them any harm. So
right.
I just figured that this is how Jamaicans speak. Not going to compromise. Well, there was like different. We did a few different edits, and I was working with a retired linguistic professor from Caribbean University um, in Jamaica, and he was wanting to do it like really strong phonetic spelling, and I was like, look, no one's going to read it if it's like that. It's just not going to
Yeah,
work. So I had to row back a bit and find some kind of balance, but I think it works. That my wish is that after about 2 pages, you kind of something auditory kicks in and you start hearing it as it should sound.
yeah. The first page was like, oh, what, and then it's like
Yeah,
getting in a cold pool. But then you get used to it. Next thing you know, you're swimming
yeah,
around and enjoying yourself. Yeah,
yeah.
but it couldn't have been. It would have been lesser had you not done it. If you just wrote it in straight, American, British. I got to say to you, even sometimes just reading something or watching a TV show in full on English BBC, it's hard for Americans. So, I don't know. Do you ever watch any of our shows and you're like, I can't understand what these people are saying?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah. I mean, generally you can understand it, but sometimes, yeah, you're kind of straining a bit. It sounds a bit wow, 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 wow.
Now I got to ask you, like, could you tell the regional differences, like New York from say California, or
Well, we can definitely tell a deep South accent and
yeah,
definitely tell a New York accent, but maybe not some of the more subtle differences. I think California, yeah, but no, I mean, like, I'm really hot on English accents. I'm like, even English people are sometimes surprised because, like, to a Southerner, um, they just think everyone from up north sounds the same. But I know because I lived in the north for a while, so I know the difference between like a Yorkshire accent and a Lancashire accent and a Midlands accent and a Stoke-on-Trent accent. They're all kind of different. You just get a feel for them. Uh, so yeah, the accents in England, you don't even need to go very far because it's a small
right,
country.
yeah,
You don't need to go very far. People talk completely differently. I mean, if
right.
you heard a Newcastle accent, I mean, it's virtually Anglo-Saxon. I mean, it's like it doesn't even sound like English.
There's a guy who lives in New Zealand, but he was born and raised in Wales, and he comes on my channel. He's a big comic book fan, and every once in a while he'll just talk Welsh just to mess with me, and I'm like, that's not even a language, like it doesn't sound like, like I'm a New Yorker. My mother's Irish. My grandmother spoke Gaelic, but every once in a while she would talk Gaelic, and we always thought she was just making up nonsense. It doesn't sound like anything that I'm used to. But my father would talk Italian, and we could figure it out. There's something, because we hear a lot of Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish in New York, Italian, French. You could kind of figure it out. But Welsh, Gaelic, these I don't know. They were already existing, right? And then the Scandinavians came in and brought the Teutonic languages there, right?
Are you telling me they were speaking the Welsh language, or were they actually just speaking English with a Welsh accent?
He was speaking the Welsh language. He teaches
Oh, wow.
Welsh, so he was just messing with me. I had a co-teacher years ago. She spoke Basque, another language. I and she
Yeah,
used to, she was pretty, but she had long straight hair. So on Halloween, she would dress up as a witch, and she would speak Basque, and everybody thought she was casting spells because it sounded like Harry Potter language. I just fascinated me all the different languages, and because would you say Europe itself is the same size as the United States? You know what I mean? So like us crossing state lines is like you guys crossing country lines, and yet,
that's right. Yeah.
but if you go to Boston, which is only a couple of hours drive, or you go to Philadelphia, which is the accents, I almost can't understand people from you know what I mean. Sometimes I'm like, what are you saying? So I get what you're saying. I never thought of it like that before. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. New
But the
Jersey
Jamaican
accent.
accent is very. I really love the way Jamaicans speak. It's very lyrical. It's poetic, and they use a lot of phrases like slogans, like old time sayings that have been around in their language for a long time. I included a few of those. I made animals speak them. You've got
Yeah.
the occasional talking goat. Um, yeah, once you kind of really dig into Jamaican, it's really quite beautiful the way that they speak. And like I've listened to a lot of reggae and over many years, so you get tuned into it. You hear a lot of the same kind of little phrases over and over again. So after a while, it's almost like you get educated in it from listening to the music.
So
Okay, so that picture there, go back. That yeah, so that's a sound system, like a Jamaican style sound system. That was built by Konstantinos on the left, who's the illustrator on Trombone Man, who's Greek Cypriot. Um, and he came to London in late 90s to do a fine art degree. And he got swept up in the reggae scene in London. There were some big sound systems. Like that's quite a relatively small setup. I mean, you get whole banks of those speakers, and the whole point of it is like the bass is like thunder. Um, but it's not just like it's not about just being loud. It's about the balance of the sound, like really making it sound
yeah,
crisp. The pops and the bass all has to be perfect.
yeah,
So he
I'm an
got into
electrician,
it.
and every once in a while I'll get hired to go to the studios, and I help put up all the speakers. We climb up on poles and they put them on wire. You know, they bring up these racks of speakers. Like when you look at them, they don't look so big, but they're twice as wide as I am tall.
Yeah,
Huge speakers, and we have to run all the wires, and then they have a mixer who makes. And then you hear the band do the sound check before the stadium is full. Oh man, it's really cool.
yeah. So yeah, Konstantinos built the first ever reggae sound system in Cyprus when he moved back after his time in
Oh,
London,
cool.
and he got the whole reggae thing going in Cyprus. That's not the original one; that's a more recent one. And when we posed for that photo, his puppy dog called Pixel wandered into the shot, and my partner who took the photo afterwards, she said, "Oh look, it's like Nipper in his master's voice, the old RCA thing.
Yep.
It's like almost like a modern take on a reggae sound system take on that." So we made a logo out of it. So I don't know if it's on the page, if you can see it, but somewhere on the page there is, maybe it's further up. There's a image of there's like a logo with the dog looking into a sound system.
Oh, I thought I saw it on sticker packs down here.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I think,
No, I'll find it. I'll keep scrolling. But I'm look at all the stuff that you can get. You can get records. Yeah, you could get the back issue too. So if anybody's interested, you could get issue 1. You could get issue 2, which
yeah,
is
there's a couple of Scatolites records on there. There's a 7-inch single and an LP. So we've got a whole section called, well, it's called Selector Specials, but it's a whole section made for DJs. So there's like some slip mats for DJing and some
oh,
vinyl weight
I
with
got it.
with a Trombone Man branding on the slip on the weight, metal weight, and
And
yeah,
I
we
love.
had fun. That's the new cover, Sister
Oh yes,
Aloysius.
and I love the art. It's cartoony and yet realistic at the same time. And then the coloring. I just love how it has like these gray wash tones, and then certain scenes are brightly colored to the point where it makes it like on otherworldly. It's really nice. I really like it.
Yeah, so it's not. I've noticed it's done quite a bit in comics, mixing black and white with color. Uh, but yeah, so we did the flashback scenes going back to the 40s, but we did those monochrome, but we brought color into it, like dream sequences and things like that. It works nicely. And when little boy Don suddenly hears music being played, and his brain kind of lights up, we brought color into that.
Yeah, it's so good. So how many issues do you think you're going to go?
Okay, well, we started off. the idea was to spread it over 7 issues, but that was only really because funding wise, I just didn't know how much I could raise on a crowdfund. I knew how long I wanted the final book to be eventually, how much story I wanted to put in. So if I can afford it, I'll bring it down to 5 issues and just make them longer. So the idea is to have a record released with each one as well. So it's not just about the comic, it's we're creating new music to go
Oh,
with it.
cool.
Yeah, so it's a series of music releases and comic releases at the same time. But yeah, at the moment we're still aiming at 7, but it just depends on what budget we have available and if
Now,
I
forgive
can
me
do
for
them.
asking. I don't. You said it, but I don't think I heard. Is the records are they like old classic Jamaican
No,
music?
it's well, it's what it is. It's a guy from a band, a London ska band called Chain Ska Brassica. He's a trombonist himself. He grew up in a family of trombonists. Lucas Petter, his name is, and he formed the band when they were at school. They went on to support Madness when they were still teenagers, like playing stadiums and stuff when they were still like 18, 19 years old. They went and recorded in Jamaica. And so Lucas's big inspiration is Don Drummond. He's always been a massive Drummond fan. So he loves what I'm doing, and he asked if he could be the musical director for the
Oh,
project.
cool.
So the first issue came with a single, but it wasn't especially recorded. It was something that was kind of donated, but it had already been out as a single. It was a Swiss ska band called the Scatanauts. But this is now we're moving into new territory because we're releasing new music, which is kind of really exciting. And so I'm basically it's evolving into a boutique record label running in
There you go.
tandem
You've
with the
become a
comics
record
product.
producer.
I have, yeah, I've become some kind of record producer.
There you go. That's cool.
Yeah, we just had a long chat earlier this evening, trying to thrash out how it's all going to work. So we'll probably the plan is to do another crowdfund later in the year just to raise the money to pay all the musicians and to do a vinyl press and get it printed onto plastic, which is.
Are you doing like tours or anything like that?
Not yet. No. At the moment, it's just getting the record out, and because the thing about vinyl and reggae and ska, it's the last genre where vinyl is still very much currency. Like vinyl pretty much died, but people who are into ska music and reggae music, they still obsessively collect the vinyl. It's all about.
I've been buying
ownership.
since we talked. I probably bought 10 vinyl records. I don't buy CDs anymore. I buy vinyl. I guess I'm a pretentious music guy now.
Nothing pretentious about it. It's
And
lovely.
out of those 10 records, 5 of them are probably jazz. So I'm turning in old punkers grow up and become old jazz guys.
Yeah. Well, your musical tastes expand, don't you? The thing about punk is that punk taught us all how to listen. Punk was like a university, and it was an education, and in a way, jazz has kind of got some of the attitude of punk. In a way, it's like immediate music. It's
Well, I've been saying that too. That punk is just immature jazz. It's like because they both embrace like dissonance and chaos in the music. So I could see. I'm listening to like some Herbie Hancock, and I'm like, this is just like more educated punk. I guess is the only word that I'm trying to think. But like, I can hear the craziness and everything, but it's more refined.
One of the greatest live shows I've ever seen was Herbie Hancock.
Oh yeah,
absolutely out of this world, completely out of this world.
Yeah, I borderline post-tentious. It's kind of like an in joke. I've been saying I've been pretentious for so long that I'm post-tentious. So that I'm coining my own phrase. I'm post-tentious. I'm beyond pretentious. I'm post-tentious. So when you were a kid, were you always into ska and everything? Were you like me?
I did it quite young, actually. Yeah, like I discovered Bob Marley when I was about 13. I mean, I grew up in West London. There's a lot of West Indians. There's a big reggae scene that had been going for a long time already, since the 60s. Um, we had a lot of Jamaicans coming over. They started moving to the UK in the 50s to help rebuild the country after the war. It was, totally destroyed. Um, and they brought the sound systems with them, and then that later evolved into the kind of UK take on reggae. And people in the States might not realize this, but England is the second home of reggae music,
Yeah.
and it was very strong in the 70s and 80s. I mean, reggae is very much in the mainstream consciousness in our country, like,
Oh yeah.
because we grew up with um, songs like Israelites by Desmond Dekker. These were #1 hit singles. Um, so yeah, there'd always be, at any given time, there'd always be like a reggae song in the charts, bubbling up in the charts.
I
So
think my introduction
mm,
was the Clash. The Clash and the Jam got me. Like
yeah,
they'd
yeah,
be playing a 3-chord thrashy song, and then the next song would be some reggae jazzy. And you're like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then you read interviews with them, and they're talking about Desmond Dekker and the Skatalites and Prince Buster. And I'm like, you know, so that's how I got into it through I classic rock, punk rock, and then
A
punk.
lot of people found reggae through punk.
Yeah.
And the story goes is that in the UK, when the punk scene happened in England, none of the bands had signed to any labels, and there was the original scene. It was just like a few hundred people. It was sort of underground, and we had the equivalent club of CBGB called the Roxy, and the DJ at the Roxy was a guy called Don Letts, who's
Oh,
now quite a well-known producer, filmmaker. He's a Rasta guy, and Don Letts was massively into reggae. So he became the DJ in this club. And so in between the bands, he was playing heavy dub and roots and stuff. And so all these punk kids coming along to see punk bands got this full immersion in reggae. And so right from the start with the UK punk scene, reggae was really part of it. And a lot of those early punks, like
yeah, Mick
they
Jones.
knew their reggae music. Mick Jones, Joe Strummer, they were all,
Yeah.
and Paul Simonon from the Clash, massive reggae fans. They were serious collectors. Johnny Rotten, John Lydon, is massively into reggae. He knows his reggae music. Um, so it was always like part of the punk DNA. And
Yeah.
reggae is part of the sort of musical DNA of Britain. Like we've got second, third generation Black British who've got their own sound now. We had grime, and now we've got drill. We had UK garage. We've had drum and bass, and these are all essentially just like um, the offspring of reggae music. It's what I call, well, it's known as bass culture. We call it bass culture. You know,
Okay.
it's it's bass music, heavy bass music that has its roots in Jamaica.
It it seems like every 20 years there's a ska revival. There was the 60s and then the 80s, and then there was one around like the 2000. Do you think another ska revival's coming? Do you think you're going to be the guy? You're going to be the ska guy?
No, no. I mean, I think it's just sort of reached a level now. I don't know if there's any more waves. Um, I just don't know. I I think it's never really gone away. To be honest, it's just there in the background. It's there if you go looking for it. It's there.
Yeah. Yeah, you hear it. You hear it in regular TV shows now. Like you said, it became mainstream, and then you know, like
I
you
mean,
said, it
for me, like the ska punk stuff doesn't really do it for me. I mean, it's not my thing. I'm really into the jazz ska.
okay. You were never a punker.
Yeah, yeah, I like punk, but and I like a bit of the specials and madness, that kind of thing. But I'm not big into all. There's so much ska and there's so much neo ska, modern ska. But for me, it's always been about the '60s stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
really into
Well,
the instrumental jazz side of it.
what I guess the second wave of Madness, that was my introduction. And then I started, oh, wait a minute, there's a song called Madness that came out 20 years before that. That was a cover. I didn't know that, things like that.
Yeah, they took their name from a Prince Buster tune. Their first single was a Prince dedicated to Prince Buster. Their second single was a Prince Buster cover. So Madness, their whole career is really owed to Prince.
And I remember when Madness came out, I was like, what is this? It was so different than anything that I was listening to. It was so different. And I'm like kind of, I like again, the first page when I was reading the dialects, I was like, what is this? Whoa, I got to stop and examine this. That's how it was with Madness. I was like, this isn't music. I don't like this, and now I love it.
They're great. Madness is great.
What's that?
Part of Madness, that I'd say they're part of a tradition of London storytelling, musical storytelling, which goes back to what we call Cockney music hall. The Victorian music halls. There's a real strong element of that in Madness, and it's kind of like a thread going through British music of this kind of almost like rap, like white Cockney London rap, chatting, talking, storytelling. Before Madness were very influenced by Ian Dury. Ian Dury?
Yeah, Ian Dury and the Blockheads.
Yeah. So they pretty much, Ian Dury's first band, Kilburn and the High Roads, Madness modelled themselves on that band.
Oh, okay.
And his style of London storytelling, it's kind of, that goes back to the Kinks before him, I guess, and bands like Squeeze in that same vein, and like bringing it up to date, things like the Streets and Lily Allen and Kay Tempest. It's all part of like a sort of a tradition in a way.
Yeah, all good bands that you just mentioned. So I'm going to bring up your campaign again because I have another stream coming up soon.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to say that I didn't give you a chance to say because I have a habit of talking too much?
Back the campaign.
Yeah, back the campaign.
Loads of stuff on it. I wanted to make this campaign all about affordable art. So there's a lot of prints on there which are not really expensive. And there's some interesting quirky items, like there's printed dish towels and nice organic cotton bag and 2 temporary tattoos. I kind of wanted to find quirky things to put on there, and I had some fun putting the backer awards together.
And if you don't want to pay shipping, guys, there's digital. You can get digital copies. And
you can get digital, but go for physical.
Yeah, me. I'm a physical guy. Yeah. But there's so much good stuff. I love the music. I love the comic. I can't wait. So what do you think? You can do one a year for 5 years? So
we might step it up. I mean, the thing is, we're beginners. Konstantinos is a first-time comics creator. I'm a first-time writer, but we're going to step it up. We'd like to do, well, one a year is probably realistic, yeah, but maybe we'll do more than that eventually. But we've got other ideas as well. We want to do other stories, maybe not so long and sprawling as this one. So we might do another crowdfund for. There's a story that's bubbling up. I can't really talk about it, but
oh, cool.
There's a really exciting Jamaican themed story which might be possible. I've got other ideas. I'm wanting to do a Scar history trilogy eventually.
Oh, cool. There you go. You see, that's the thing about making comic books is it's fun, and then you want to make other ones.
It's
much
addictive.
To your wife's chagrin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, wow, I really like this, guys. Like I backed as soon as you sent me a message. We're live now, and I went and backed. I was trying to be number one, but I don't think I made it. But I can't wait. I can't wait. When do you think you're gonna deliver?
Well, we've said April 26th, but
Oh wow!
well, the thing is, it takes time,
Right,
But
right.
Konstantinos is being really optimistic. He's saying, no, we're going to finish it by October. I'm like, okay, you can say that, but I'm going to tell people that it's April next year. And then if we do it in less time, great, but no one's going to complain by getting it sooner.
No,
So
no,
let's just say April and be safe and not stress because we don't need
that's the Scotty from Star Trek method. If it only takes 2 hours, you tell him 6, and then he yells at you, and you cut it down to 2, and you look like
exactly. Yeah, we don't want to put ourselves under pressure that we don't need. We're
yeah.
meant to be enjoying ourselves, right? It's meant to be fun.
It's meant to be fun. It's comics after all. And, man, like I said, I get excited when two of my obsessions kind of mix music and comics. That's great. There's a board game over there about making comic books in a board game. Oh man, I've been obsessed with that for the past week. I like this comment by Zach. Mainstream is unfortunately the start of the decline of any hobby. There has to be a sweet spot between niche and mainstream. That's the ideal for an audience. I used to argue against this. I used to say I can't wait until I go into a bar and everybody's playing the music that I like. And then once that happened, it just, I don't know, it kind of just ruined it. Like I was big into Dungeons and Dragons, and now everybody's playing Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is ruined.
Well, you find you find this thing that no one else is into, and you kind of you found your little world,
Right.
and then suddenly all these people that it goes mainstream, and then it's like, oh no, I wanted it to be this secret underground club that I'm a member of, and now
Yeah.
it's not.
And now
I think
everybody's going to,
when you get into a band when you're young and no one really knows about them, and then suddenly they become famous, that's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean,
yeah. I remember in high
few
school,
bands
people
like
made
that.
fun of me because I had a Dead Kennedys record. And then
Yeah.
years later in college, she sees me. She goes, "Oh, John, talked about the Dead," and she was flirting with me, and I just couldn't. And I just said, "You made fun of me. You made fun of me for liking the Dead Kennedys. That ruined that." But I just couldn't let it go. I'm not going to pretend that we're friends. You used to make fun of me because I like punk. My friend
Yeah.
Terry was just like, "You did that the absolute wrong way." But I'm gonna go. I gotta close down for a minute. I have somebody else coming at 8:30, and I want to eat food before the next, so I'm not cranky. But I can't wait. And please come back. I love talking to you about this history of this music. This is something I didn't know
It's
anything
great
about.
coming
And I
here.
feel
Thank you,
like
John.
talking to you inspired me to learn so much. I learned a lot more.
Well, feel free to ask me anything at any time about music. Um, you know, there's so much with Jamaican music. It's like what people don't realize is the Bob Marley thing is just the tip of a very, very,
Yes.
very big iceberg.
Yes.
And once you go below that tip, you realize oh my God, there's not just hundreds, there's thousands of these artists, and it's
Oh,
great music.
before you go, where can we get your book, Alpha? What's it, Alpha
Well,
City?
Alpha Boy School, Cradle of
Alpha
Jamaican Music. It's available on Amazon actually, so you can just buy it from Amazon and get it direct from there. Sorry, it's Amazon, but, we use print on demand, so it's really convenient. We don't have to stock it ourselves. I mean, I have my own copies, but it means print on demand is great. Amazon handles it; they print it, they ship it. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I just got a copy now while we were talking. That's right up my alley. So there you go. I don't know. What does that mean? You got 8.6 cents. I don't know how much royalties are on a book.
It's decent actually. It's
Oh, good.
actually but it's split between me and my co-author, so we
Yeah.
have to sell double the amount.
I always joke that every time I have a talk with somebody, it costs me at least $20 because I back their comic, I buy their book, I get their T-shirt. but I like talking to people and I like talking about this stuff, so it's all good. But I'm really got to go because I have a habit. I'll just keep talking and then I'll make my other guys wait. But man, I can't wait. Please come back, especially now that you got me excited about you're going to make something else, like a reggae trilogy or something. That'll be excellent. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you about that next time.
Bye bye, everybody. Check out his stuff. Here's the link, and bye bye, everyone.
Cheers, John. Thanks for having me.
No
Take
problem.
care.
It's
Thanks,
a
everyone.
pleasure. I enjoy it.